Yuji does not know what he's getting himself into. He's facing an opponent wielding a power unlike any other. The culling games begin. Yuji and Megumi enter the game with a specific objective in mind, putting an end to the culling game as soon as possible. They plan to do this by using 100 points to add a rule that would nullify the aspect of the culling game that forces participants to kill each other. They plan to find a powerful sorcerer named Yuji and Higuruma who has already earned 100 points. In other words, he's a man who's already killed dozens of sorcerers. As they enter the culling game, Yuji and Megumi get teleported to different places. After some minor battles, Yuji runs into a sorcerer named Amai, who leads him to Higuruma, who's using a theater as a base. As Yuji walks into the theater, he sees Higuruma laying fully clothed in a bathtub full of water. He asks Yuji, who is he and why are you here? Yuji responds with, same to you. Higuruma says, haven't you taken baths in your clothes? It feels better than I expected. He then sits up in the tub and says, these days I don't care about much, so I'm challenging myself to do things I previously thought I shouldn't. Basically, I went off the rails in my 30s. Higuruma was a criminal lawyer who was passionate about making things right. Unfortunately, because of how corrupt the system is, his efforts were proven futile. Higuruma tolerated his clients taking out their anger on him when he wasn't able to give them an innocent verdict because he understood their frustration. But the combination of being an outlet for his clients' anger combined with his own anger towards the corrupt law system took a toll on his mental health, and he reached his breaking point, which led him to becoming the man he is today, a man who's killed dozens of people in the culling game without any remorse. Yuji asks him, is he Higuruma, and that he wants to talk. He jokingly responds with, yes, I'm a lawyer, so talking to me costs 500 yen every half hour. Yuji looks confused and Higuruma says, I'm joking, I just wanted to play the money-grabbing lawyer for a change. Yuji asks him, you have 100 points, right? Then thinks to himself, this is a modern-day sorcerer. He'll listen to me and make a deal. Yuji says, to be blunt, we want to put an end to the culling game, or rather, we want to negate the forced killing. Can we use your 100 points to add a rule? Higuruma responds with, okay, I'll be blunt too. No. The culling game presents possibilities. Sometimes the law is powerless, but what about the culling game rules? If the power I have received is real, then so are the rules. He goes on to explain, what if the rule breakers got punished? According to natural law without any prosecutors or trial, wouldn't that be wonderful? I recognize the rules aren't perfect, but I want to preserve the culling game's basic mechanics, so I don't want it to end so soon, especially when it comes to rules 2 and 8. I like to see curse technique removal at least once. Yuji tries to explain to him that that's part of the culling game's ritual, and everyone in the country will die. Higuruma isn't buying it. With a serious look on his face, Yuji says, let me rephrase. Let me use your 100 points. Higuruma stands up and asks Yuji if he ever killed someone that ticks him off. It feels so much better than I expected. And we see him conjure up a large shikigami with a black body that has 3 stub points and a white face that has eyes that are sewn shut. Higuruma surprisingly starts the battle off with using his domain expansion, Deadliest sentencing. It manifests a small courtroom domain surrounded by guillotines, where he and Yuji are faced on podiums standing across from one another. This domain does not guarantee a hit. Instead, anyone inside of it is simply forced to follow its rules. Yuji is surprised that he kicked off the fight with his domain and quickly goes to kick him, but the kick stops right before it reaches him. Higuruma explains that violence is not permitted in the domain, and anyone who tries to engage in it will return to their podium. Inside the courtroom, Judgment, his shikigami, floats behind Higuruma and acts as the prosecution. Higuruma tells Judgment, please begin. Judgment says, Yuji lies under suspicion of entering the Maji Vegas Pachinko parlor on July 16, 2017, despite being underage. Higuruma explains that Yuji is the defendant and Judgment knows everything about everyone inside the domain, and he does not receive any information from Judgment, just evidence that the Shikigami submits for deliberation. The evidence is not conclusive and Higuruma is not told what's inside. Yuji must state his case to dispel all doubt. Yuji realizes that this domain isn't fatal, plus it relies on a binding vow that requires an explanation of the rules. Higuruma says we both have one chance to make a statement. After your statement, I will offer a rebuttal based on this evidence, then judgment will deliver a lawful verdict. Higuruma tells Yuji he has three options: silence, a confession, or denial. Yuji questions if he can lie in court. Higuruma drops a bar: if everyone told the truth, there'd be no need for trial. In his head, Yuji admits to going to play the machines at the parlor. He thinks to himself the evidence isn't necessarily conclusive. Then he thinks about all the different scenarios and the evidence that can prove it and how he should respond. Yuji decides to partially tell the truth. He says he went into the parlor but only to take a dump. Higuruma presents evidence given to him and it shows security camera footage. He goes on to say it's certain that despite being underage, he entered with the intent to play machine. The establishment forbid entry to minors. Yuji says that's not fair. There's nothing I could have said. Higuruma says on the contrary, Japan forbids gambling, so parlors and cash exchanges are separate legal entities. In some cases, multiple parlors share one exchange, but you're only on trial for the parlor. You just needed to deny it by saying, I've never seen that pachinko parlor. Now for the verdict. Judgment finds Yuji guilty and sentences him to confiscation. Yuji doesn't feel any different at first, but Higuruma doesn't waste any time and throws his gavel cursed tool at Yuji, but he blocks it. Higuruma quickly closes the distance between them and he makes his gavel reappear in his hand and enlarges it, then swings it at Yuji, smashing through Yuji's guard, sending him crashing through several rows of seats. Higuruma condemns Yuji on being tough. Yuji says, yeah, there's one thing I got going for me. He notices that he cannot control his cursed energy. Higuruma continues to swing his gavel at Yuji. At this point, all Yuji can do is dodge. He looks overwhelmed. The narrator explains that through analyzing the curse technique that came by default within his domain, he learned the basics of a barrier technique. By working backward from barrier technique, he acquired an instinctive grasp of reinforcement technique derived from cursed energy. Within 12 days of awakening his cursed technique, Higuruma reached a level comparable to a grade 1 sorcerer. Before entering the colony, he defeated many cursed spirits and defeated at least 20 players who attacked him. He's a true prodigy. Higuruma asks Yuji if he's unable to utilize his cursed energy. Yuji says yeah, thanks to you. Then he clarifies that Judgment's confiscation sentence is losing the ability to activate cursed technique. He suspects Yuji doesn't possess any innate cursed technique and says, so the effect must have stopped you from using cursed energy altogether. He then questions how Yuji can stand up against him without any cursed energy. It's because of his physical prowess. His raw strength must be immense. Higuruma shapeshifts his gavel into a staff and quickly realizes that if he's not careful, Yuji will defeat him, and he knows he has to crush him with his full might. Higuruma starts to attack Yuji. Yuji dodges a flurry of swings from Higuruma. He grabs onto his tool and tries to pull it away, but Higuruma makes it disappear. Yuji then backflips over the tub, then kicks it toward Higuruma, who conjures the gavel back into his hands and smashes the tub with an uppercut, sending pieces in a rush of water at Yuji. Yuji protects his face and Higuruma uses this moment to attack. He jumps and changes his gavel into a big mallet and slams it down on Yuji. Of course, Yuji blocks it and eats the attack. Higuruma is completely shocked by Yuji. He says it's like he's fighting an unbreakable doll. Yuji questions how long he can last and that he needs his curse technique back. He's so powerful, but there has to be some weakness to him. He's thinking hard of a weakness, then remembers Higuruma is a lawyer and screams out, I want a retrial. This forces them back inside the domain where all violence is forbidden. Higuruma says, you're starting to get it now, huh? Yuji says, if I don't admit my guilt, I can request a retrial and Judgment can't refuse. Yuji demands a do-over. Judgment presents Yuji Itadori stands accused of mass murder in Shibuya on October 31st, 2018. With a shocked look on his face, Yuji says, "Yeah, I did it. I'm not lying and I won't deny." Judgment screams out, "Guilty." The sentence is confiscation and death penalty. Confiscation, as an additional punishment to the death penalty, is the harshest sentence judgment can deal out. Higuruma is armed with the sword of execution, a blade that will kill its target with a single cut. Higuruma says to emphasize with human emotions means to understand their weakness. The weakness of a victim, the weakness of the accused day after day after day after day. I was fed up with it. Ugly. That's what I thought every time I tried to help another person. And that includes you, Yuji. All people are weak and ugly, no matter how high-minded a soul you aspire to. He screams, there's nothing more to it. The darkness before your eyes is just darkness. Even if you shine a light, all you see is emptiness before you. He rushes towards Yuji, who jumps towards the seats behind him. Yuji throws several seats in his jacket to create multiple distractions. He follows the distractions up by throwing a sweeping kick at Higuruma's feet. While all of this is happening, Higuruma questions why Yuji confessed to the crime, that he wasn't the one to kill them. The evidence proves that Sukuna was the one who did it, so why? Why? Higuruma jumps over the kick and gets in position to deliver the final cut, but Yuji nails him with an uppercut to the gut that connected. At the same time, Higuruma voluntarily deactivates his curse technique. He sends Higuruma flying back and crashing through the seats behind him. Yuji instantly notices he deactivated his technique. Higuruma says Article 39, Clause 1 of the Penal Code. The absence of reason and or control signifies non-compos mentis. Sukuna possessed your body in Shibuya, and you didn't abandon your self-control voluntarily, so you're innocent. You didn't commit that crime. Yuji still wants to take fault. He says it's because he's too weak. Yuji asks him why he dispelled his technique. Higuruma says, I remembered why I got into law in the first place. There's still lots of weak people like you. Higuruma says, sit down, I'll give you 100 points. He asks Yuji if he ever killed someone and if he felt awful. He then summons Kogane and requests a rule be added that lets players transfer points between one another. Kogane announces a rule has been approved and officially adds it to the game. Higuruma then gives Yuji one of his points so he won't be affected for 19 days and decides to leave the theater. Yuji tries to get Higuruma to team up with him. Higuruma explains that his two leftover points are from the judge and prosecutor he killed before entering the colony. He wants to turn himself in and decides to ponder on his actions alone until then. Lastly, he says, if I stay with you, I'll just hate myself more. Sorry, I wasn't criticizing you. See you later. And that's how the fight ends. I really enjoyed this fight. This fight between Yuji and Higuruma was short, but it was nothing short of amazing. I cannot wait to see his domain expansion animated. Let me know your thoughts on this fight down below. Higuruma's innate technique was probably the most unique technique we've seen so far. But what really stood out in this battle was the character development we saw Higuruma go through at the end. If you read his backstory, you'll grow to really like this character. It was cool to see him regain his humanity through his battle against Yuji. There are some theories about Yuji's hidden curse technique that could answer how he changed Higuruma so quickly. Who knows? This fight was a testament to the depth and complexity of characters in this series. Gege Akutami is doing a fantastic job with this series. Him and Yuki Tabata are two of my favorite new gen mangakas out. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're a fan of Maki Zenin, you're not going to want to miss my video about her standing up against her entire family. Click the video you see on screen now. Until next time.